friends, and welcome back to my another video of Smell of Optimism. My name is Pratik Nayak, and today I thought I would talk about the power of decision making and how you can make a value-based decision. So whether you are an individual or an organization, this concept would apply to both of you. So let's get started, shall we? Now, a recent internet study has established that being human, we make about 35,000 decisions in one day. In other words, our brain is capable enough to make 35,000 different choices within 24 hours. That includes all kinds of decisions, from small to big. So, what color of shirt I'm going to wear for the job? What am I going to have for the lunch? I got some time before I go to bed. What should I watch? And things like that, right? So these are all different choices which our brain makes in a daytime. Now, making a small choice is quite easy, as we all know. However, what we do not know is that every single decision that we make is a piece of communication to the outside world. By making every single decision, we are telling something about ourselves to the listener, something about who we are, right? So let me give you an example of the power of decision making. Now, this example is going to be based on the business environment that we live in today's world. Now, in today's business environment, one terminology has become quite popular, which is layoff, right? In other words, to sacrifice people to balance the books. I'm not joking either. That is what it is. At least to those companies who employ this strategy in their bad years. They are sacrificing their people to manage their books. That's what they're doing. They are putting the numbers before the people. Right? This one decision of layoff is telling something about the company itself to the outside world. Just imagine a company who has just happened to miss its arbitrary project has announced a layoff. In other words, a company has just asked one of its loyal employees to go back home and tell to his family that he is not going to be able to provide for his family just because the company had missed some targets in one odd financial year. That's what it is. By the way, the practice of layoff, before 1970, it did not exist at all. It got introduced in 1980s and got more popularized in 90s, which were boom years. Today is different. You cannot have the same strategy in today's environment, yet it has become a standard way of business today to balance the books by sacrificing the people. Now, just to think of this for a second. By employing the practice of layoff, the company has communicated with two groups of people at the same time. One is those who the company has just laid off. So those people who have lost their job because of this strategy, the company has communicated with them that no matter how hard you work here, no matter how loyal you are to your organization, no matter how much do you work here or how long have you been here, if you happen to fall on the wrong side of the spreadsheet, we are sorry, but we cannot guarantee your employment with us. Right? This is one message, one communication which the company has just done by making this decision to this group of people who have lost their job. Right? At the same time, the company has also communicated with those who managed to keep that job, the company has just communicated with them that you could be next. You could be next. In other words, we are ready to compromise and sacrifice our people and our people's values just to balance our books. And what they say in the justification is that nothing personal, it is just business. They say nothing personal, it is just business, whereas the fact of the matter is that the business is the most personal thing. The business is the most personal thing. We spend more time at work than we do at our home. We spend more time with our colleagues and our managers than we do with our family. Then how can you say that business is not personal? It is personal. And you just cannot sacrifice humans to balance the books. You just cannot. But the reality is that people do. Companies do. Right? That is today's reality. Back to the talk. So this was one decision which has affected both the groups. And speaking of layoff and speaking of the power of decision making, let me just share a small story with you, which is a real life story. In 2007-8, we all know what had happened, something which had changed the way we used to look at the economy. The global financial crisis happened at that time. Now, during this global financial crisis, most of the companies got bankrupt, they got merged into the other organizations, most of them got simply out of the business, just to put it simple, in simple words. Now, one company, which is called, the name of the company is Barry Way Millers. This is a multi-billion-dollar company based in the USA. It is the manufacturing company, so it manufactures technologies and solutions for small to medium-sized businesses. That's what it does. During the global financial crisis, this company had faced a lot of trouble. Some devastating issues were there in this company, because as we all know, at the time of crisis, most of the companies and most of the businesses, they put a cut on their capital expenditure. So most of the customers of this company had stopped buying products from them, and as a result, the company found itself in a quagmire, in a devastating and catastrophic situation, which would have resulted in a bankruptcy. Now, at that time, the tension was everywhere. People were worried as to what would happen to our company. And as a result, there was a meeting which would include only C-level executives. And in this meeting, all C-level executives were gathered, and they discussed about what to do to get the company out of this mess and to get it back on track. So they came up with different strategies, different options. One of the most common strategies, as we know, was layoff. Most of the C-level executives said that let's go for the layoff so that we can be in the business. That is the only way to cut the costs and to stable our business. Right? That's what they said. On that day, in that meeting room, those executives were prepared to sacrifice their people so that they can be in the business. However, Bob Chapman, the CEO of Barry Way Miller, refused to go ahead with this strategy. he was not convinced to go ahead with the layoff because he believed in the people, in the people industry. He was not ready to sacrifice his people just so that they could be in the business. So he said that let us not go ahead with the layoff strategy. Instead, he had announced another strategy, and by this program, all employees of this organization, from a consultant to a CEO, would have to take 4 weeks of unpaid vacation. They would have to take 4 weeks of unpaid leaves. That was the idea behind this strategy. So the concept behind this program was that Bob said, let us all suffer a bit so that one of us should not have to suffer a lot. That was his philosophy at that time. Now, 2 things happened because of this decision of not laying off people to balance the books. 2 things happened. The first, it brought an unshakable trust between the management and its people, the employees. It built up a culture overnight in that company which still exists, and I guarantee you that it is going to exist until the company is there. Because on that day, the people realized that no matter what happens, we are in safe hands. And the second impact which had happened was something which was not a part of this program. It was totally remarkable, and it was a miracle. So what happened was, those people who could afford more unpaid leaves, they had started trading their unpaid leaves with those who could not afford more unpaid leaves. In other words, if I can afford 6 weeks of unpaid leaves, I would trade my 2 weeks of unpaid leaves with someone who could not afford 4 weeks of unpaid leaves, so that he only had to take 2 weeks of unpaid leaves. And as a result, trust and cooperation emerged within the organization's culture, which is still there. People talk about it all the time in the USA, how big this decision was and how impactful this decision was. So this was a power of decision making in the business world, in the business environment. And as a result of effective decisions, a company is able to articulate what it stands for, and this is how your values are built up within the organization, and this is how the stakeholders would perceive you as a company, right? So when you make effective decisions, those effective decisions are called the value-based decisions, like the one which I just spoke about. The decision that Bob Chapman had made on that day was a value-based decision. Let me tell you how a value-based decision is formed and what does it look like. So just imagine this is a pipeline. So there are 2 pipelines for decision making in any organization. This pipeline is what I call a why pipeline, and this pipeline is what I call a what pipeline. Now this is where the intangibles lie. In other words, this is where the values and the beliefs lie of the organization. And this is where all the tangible lies, which means the interest lies. In other words, this is where the dollar value lies. Now, when a decision is to be made in the organization, this decision comes in the organization, and then it is up to the decision makers, in other words, the managers, to decide through which pipeline they would want to pass the decision through. Whether through the pipeline of why, which establishes the values, or the pipeline of what, which merely shows the interest, which is the dollar value. Let me give you an example of this so that you understand what I'm talking about. So those decisions which go through the what pipelines are something like, just imagine you are a consultancy firm and a client comes to you with a project to do some market research and the competitive analysis for him, and you along the way realize that the company is based on wrong values and the company is not doing ethical business. However, the service fee which the client was offering to you is too high not to deny the proposal. What would you do? Would you go against your values and accept the proposal and make the decision through the what pipeline, or would you rather go through the why pipeline and decide what are your values and who you really are and whether you should or should not make the decision? Right. Most of the companies, they go through the what pipeline in that situation and they take the proposal despite knowing that it is unethical. Why? Because that would give them more money. That would keep their interest. Now imagine if you are a manufacturer who manufactures different products, and then one day one of your customer is placing a huge order to your company, but in return he asked for a larger discount which is beyond your policy. What would you do? Would you see the short-term gain of the business, or would you stick to your policy and procedure which has been set for years, which are your values? Some organization would go with the order and they would decide to get the order and give them whatever discount they're asking for. Now, if you look at all these decisions in a vacuum, individually, it might make sense to some, right? Because it will definitely give you a short-term benefit when you let all the decisions go through your what pipeline. It will definitely give you the profit in a short run. However, when you take a macro look of these all decisions, it will not make sense at all. You know why? Because a company often forgets that there is a large group of people who is watching them constantly, which we call the stakeholders, whether it is their customers or the suppliers or the different government bodies or their employees. These are all the stakeholders, and they watch the companies make the decisions on a daily basis. They watch it, they observe it. And when they make the decisions based on what, based on the interest, they communicate something with these outsiders and insiders. They communicate that we are not who we say we are. In other words, we do not stand for anything. We will go in the wind that our interest would take us, and we do not establish the things which we say and do in our organization, right? In other words, we are not consistent in our decision making. We are not consistent, right? So it becomes hard for them to understand who you really are and what you stand for. What are your values? So, for example, an employee would work for you. However, he will also keep his eyes open for the other opportunities, and as soon as he gets the other opportunities, he would go there and he would not look back at you, because he knows that you don't stand for anything. You haven't stood up for your values, and leaving the company is just okay. This is what you have communicated to one of your internal employee, right? For example, a customer would stick to you for as long as you are giving good discount to him, but as soon as he finds better deal somewhere else, he would just go there. He will not turn back to you, right? Because you failed to establish loyalty, because loyalty comes from beliefs and sharing views and ideas. You have failed to tell them who you really are, and that's why they can leave you in your bad time, and if they get a better offer, they are ready to leave you, right? Now I'll tell you how a value-based decision is formed and what does it look like. In a wartime, when there is a war, we send our soldiers. When I say we, I mean the government sends the soldiers to fight against the opponents, right? Now, when they go on the field, the battlefield, they finish the battle, and at the end of the battle, they carry the wounded opponent in their trucks. They bring them to our hospitals. Our doctors would nurse them back with our medicines so that they can get healthier. Now, this is not in our best interest to do that. However, this is kind of who we are. These are our values, right? We stick to our values during that time. We do not look for our interest during that time. And when we stick to our values, our beliefs, people from the outside, they can clearly understand who we are, and our actions and our decisions articulate to them what we intend to do and what is our vision. And this is called a vision, which can clearly be articulated by the actions which we take, by the decisions that we make, which are consistent. By following this pipeline, it is possible that you may make smaller gain compared to this pipeline, but it is in a shorter term, in a long run. And by looking at your all decisions from a macro point of view by this group, they will start to understand that there is a pattern behind all the decisions that you make. There is a consistency behind all the decisions that you make. And this consistency will tell them who you are. They will tell them what is your vision. And this in return will bring continuous business from customers. This will bring loyalty from employees as well. And the joke is that those companies who follow this pipeline, they will find themselves in a better position. Because these companies talk about their future 50 to 100 years down the track, and these companies cannot think of the future beyond 10 years, I guarantee you that. Because all the decisions are based on short term, which means they last for the short term. And these companies would invite things like mistrust, paranoia, things like layoffs. All these different things will be there in this company, and nobody is ready to do business with this kind of organization, would you? And there is one more thing which is quite important for any organization to know, is that when you follow your why and when you make all the decisions through the pipeline of why, you will attract vast majority of people in general. And to establish this theory, I would like to touch base on a small concept which most of us are well aware of. This is called a law of diffusion of innovation. Now, in this law of diffusion of innovation, 2.5% are innovators. The next 13.5% is early adopters. The next 34% is our early majority. Then 34% is our late majority. And then the last 16% is what I call laggards. Now these are called laggards, and the only reason why these people would buy the touch-tone phone is because they can't buy the rotary phones anymore, right? This is what they are. Now, when a company introduces any product to the market, most of the companies would want to reach to a tipping point. They would want to target this mass audience, right? Because they believe that just by targeting these two categories, they can get more exposure and more business out of the market. So everything that they do, they always focus on these two categories. But what they fail to understand is that people who belong to these two categories, they are highly cynical. They would not try something unless somebody else had tried it first and unless it has been approved by somebody else. These are highly cynical people. It is very hard to target these people without targeting these people. You know what these people are? The early adopters and innovators. These are the people who stay in a queue for hours to get the first iPhone, whereby they could have got the same instrument after a week by just walking in the store. But they believed in the message of the provider, and they believed in the product, and they wanted to be known and recognized as first buyers of that product, and that is why they stood for hours. Some people stood overnight in a queue so that in the morning when the shop opens up, they can get their first iPhone. These are your early adopters and innovators. The company who has long-term vision, they would target these two categories, and these two categories would follow automatically, because here is where your why lies, and here is where your what lies. These people will only look at the tangibles, and these people will look at the intangibles. These people will look at your values and your marketing message, and these people will only look at your products, your features, your characteristics, and the reviews which are provided by this category. Right? So this is the impact of targeting those who believe in what you believe, and this is the power of making a value-based decision. Thank you so much for watching me today in this video, and I will see you very soon in my other video. And do not forget to subscribe and like and spread this video, and you will also see all these videos on my website, which is www.smellofoptimism.com. See you next time. Have a great day.